Hello, Trojan fans. Welcome to a very special edition of the Peristyle Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Abraham, joined alongside Mr. Triple Double himself, Connor Morrissette. He is coming at us live from Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana, where Big Ten Media Days are wrapping up. He's on Radio Row. We got him muted right now just because they got PJ Fleck is talking in the background, but we're going to get to all that. If you're watching us live on YouTube, thanks very much for doing that, or watching our replay. You can see Connor there, and we'll have some pictures that our team took when they were at Big Ten Media Day. USC, the players, and Lincoln Riley, they spoke on Wednesday. We're recording this on Thursday, so we're going to get to all that, everything that's going on. There's some big rule changes coming down in college football we want to talk about with Connor, and then answer any questions that you guys have. If you do have questions you want to send to the show, we're getting ramped up here. Fall camp is starting in less than 2 weeks. Podcast at uscfootball.com is the email address, or you can call or text us at 424-254-9141. And if you're listening on Spotify or the Apple podcasting app, you can leave us a 5-star rating there. We would really, really appreciate if you did that. And on the Apple podcasting app, you can even leave us a review, and those are great. We'll read those on the air when you leave us a 5-star review. Well, let's bring in Mr. Morrissette here. Again, like live in Indianapolis. I think Shotgun and Chris Trevino were also there, and they've already took off. Connor doesn't leave till this evening, so he's got a little bit extra time in Indy. How you doing, Connor?
Doing well, yeah. Like you said, PJ Fleck just wrapped up his speech, so it might be a little quieter now, but the coaches, they talk really quickly this morning, or I guess this afternoon now. So Mike Loxley is up next. Hopefully he's a little quieter than Fleck. He's kind of a loud, rah-rah guy, so if you can hear him in the back, that's what's going on here. But yeah, it's great to be here. USC was awesome yesterday. I'll give you the full breakdown here in a second, but happy to be with you.
Yeah, row your boat with PJ Fleck around there, and cool stuff. So if you guys didn't know, 3 different days for Big Ten Media Day. So USC and UCLA both spoke yesterday. So we're going to get a sense from Connor what it was like out there. I was going to go too, but we already had 3 people going. Flights are kind of crappy from LA to Indianapolis. I think there's only one direct flight that I could find. So let you guys handle it. They did a Helium Boys podcast maybe earlier this morning. Did you guys do it, or was it last night? I don't know. Or
So it was a big debate. Should we do it late last night or early this morning? And we were supposed to start at 7. I think we started at 7:30. So we did it this morning, but that was kind of a fun back and forth we had last night.
Yeah, I saw that pop up on Twitter, and I was like, okay. So I listened to that before I recorded this. I didn't have a lot of time to do it, but I made sure I got that in there. Before we get anything else, I do want to thank our sponsor, Trader Joe's. Many, many years we've been working with Trader Joe's. Love it. Connor, I like going fishing. I made a really cool poke bowl. Now, the fish I caught, and I had that, the tuna that I caught, but I pick up, so they got the cool green onions I like that they have to Trader Joe's, and they have the smaller cucumbers. I think the Persian cucumbers, so I can cut those up and dice those up, and the shelled edamame. So I get all of that into the poke bowl mix. So I like doing that. And every time I've been buying the onion dip and the ghost pepper chips. Those are really good. So they're just little spice and a little tang to them. So I like it with the onion dip. But did do a little stocking up yesterday at Trader Joe's, so I thought I would talk about that before we jumped on the show.
I love it. It's noon here, so I'm already hungry for lunch. That sounds like a very nice lunch, but I don't think they'll be serving that here. I'll have to come back.
No poke in Indy, probably not. You're always hungry though, so I don't know what the thing. Yeah,
true.
So you've experienced Pac-12 Media Day. This is a different beast. Basically, on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium. If you've ever watched the NFL Combine, I guess something kind of similar, but reporters and everyone is down on the field. Maybe it's just kind of let everyone know what it was like down there, how it worked for USC and the other schools that were presenting during their time window or during their day that they were out there.
Yeah, I don't know how well people can see, but I can turn my camera around here.
Oh, nice.
So right here, that's where all the individual podiums are, and then that big stage way back there, that's where all the coaches talk, or I'm trying to make it straight. They all talk to start the day. So, yeah, so yesterday was USC's day, and it starts with all the coaches on the given day, they go up to that podium that I just showed you, and they talk for 15 minutes. They give an opening statement. That's when Deshaun Foster had his freeze up, which was kind of bizarre, and then they answer questions. The difference in the opening statements between Dan Lanning today and Deshaun Foster was night and day. I just listened to Lanning a few minutes ago. Just he kind of sounded more like a coach than Foster. I don't know what that was all about yesterday. But anyway, so they answer the question, or they do the statement, then they answer the questions, and then it's kind of a free-for-all. So we were able to get some guys one-on-one when they had some breaks. And then later in the day, Lincoln Riley talks again at the podiums, the smaller ones over here, and then the players all talk. So you get a chance to do some one-on-one stuff with those guys, and it's more of a scrum than a Q&A traditional press conference. So we learned a lot. It was fun to do some stuff with the National 247 team. I had a fun interview with Jonah Monheim with the professional cameras. That was cool. I think that's coming out today, so people can see that. Yeah, there's Jonah right there. Really fun day, a lot to get to, but that's sort of how it all worked. A lot of opportunity to talk to some of these guys, and I definitely learn more or know more now than I did coming into the day. That's for sure.
Yeah, great stuff there. The team was on the ground. We had a comment that I go to Hawaii and I send Connor to Indianapolis. Yeah, like that's fine. I really wanted to go. I wanted to go for the last 3 years, and I think 1 year I got sick. Just when USC was announced, and USC won't officially be in the Big Ten until August 2nd, so they're going to make a big deal out of that. But it was nice to be able to watch on Big Ten Network, and you get a good feel for what's going on, and seeing Ashley Adamson and Yogi Roth on there interviewing some of the USC players and coaches and stuff. That was kind of cool. But yeah, you get much more access now that USC is part of the Big Ten. But it's great. I mean, I know 24/7 Sports had locked up, and CBS had locked up some one-on-one interviews and allowed you guys to take part of that. That was very cool. A lot of good content going up over at uscfootball.com on our YouTube channel. So these guys were on the ground killing it. You're coming back tonight, right, Connor?
Yeah, flight leaves Indy at 5, and then with the time change, I land at 6:30, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, but a lot of cool stuff I think that came out of this. I mean, maybe let's start with like what Lincoln Riley, being up on the podium and what he had to say up there. There were some interesting things about the Notre Dame game, competing for championships and all that. If you want to kind of give your sort of recap or thoughts on things that Lincoln Riley had to say from Media Day.
Certainly, yes. So we can start with the Notre Dame game. He was asked, would he want to continue that game? And he said, I would love to. And then he sort of talked about how he wasn't sure if that game continuing to be played is what's in USC's best interest to win a national championship. So a little bit of saying one thing, but maybe meaning something else as he elaborated a little bit more. That was really interesting. I tweeted about that, and of course, everyone from all across the country, college football fans, took that and ran with it, and most people weren't happy to hear Lincoln Riley say that, and I get that, because it's not like Notre Dame and USC used to be in the same conference, and then one team switched conferences, so now the rivalry goes away. Notre Dame's always been independent. No matter what USC does conference-wise, that's a game that always should be on the schedule because of Notre Dame's situation. It's not like Texas and Texas A&M going into separate conferences, even though now they're back in the same one. So I think I get what he's saying, but to me, I don't think USC fans want to hear him say that getting rid of the Notre Dame game is in their best interest to win a national championship. I think ideally you beat Notre Dame and you have a really good season, you make the playoff, and then you hopefully win a championship. It doesn't have to necessarily be one or the other. You can play Notre Dame every year and still make that game, especially when you can lose 3 or 4 games now and still make that college football playoff. So I was a little disappointed to hear that. I get the logic. I don't think really that was in Lincoln's best intention to say that, because you're going to get a lot of hate and a lot of people are going to push back on that. So nothing set in stone, of course. I don't even know what the conversations are behind the scenes, but based on what Lincoln Riley said, I think deep down he would probably like that game to go away.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There could be, the Big Ten would love to have Notre Dame in the conference, and then that would be a conference game. There's always posturing, and like maybe it's like, Tony Petitti's like, hey, maybe we could like float that out there. I'm not just saying there's like some conspiracy theory or something, but it would be in the Big Ten's interest if there was reason for Notre Dame to join the conference. But they were, they were part of the construction engine of this new era of the college football playoff, the expanded playoff, and it's very favorable for an independent like Notre Dame. It's going to be good every year. So less of a chance that they would join a conference. We'll see if things keep blowing up, if the ACC blows up, maybe something like that will happen. The championship aspiration stuff I thought was kind of interesting, and wanting to compete for championships. There was, one part of it, it seems like, hey, USC's there, new defense and all that, and the other part, they're still getting up to speed with NIL and the strides they've kind of made to, with facilities and things like that. What did you kind of make of, his talk about the expectations for this team now and going forward in the Big Ten?
I thought that, again, it was a little bit of speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because he was asked, what's it going to take to really compete with Ohio State and Oregon? And then he said, well, we are competing with them. We're at the top of any conference, not just the Big Ten. We're one of the top teams in the Big Ten. If we were in the SEC, we'd be one of the top teams in the SEC. But then later in the day, he said we're playing catch up with NIL. We're playing catch up with facilities. We're playing catch up with just building the roster. And earlier when he was talking about Oregon and Ohio State, he said, look at these situations that Ryan Day and Dan Lanning inherited compared to what I've inherited. So I get what he's trying to say. USC, of course, wants to compete at the top, and it's USC. They really should be doing that. But he did inherit a situation that was less than ideal, with the team winning 4 games the year before. He's won 19 in his 2 years here. Things are getting better. I think with the recruiting being where it's at right now, losing those 5-star prospects and just not having that 2025 class that a lot of people would hope for right now, and then you combine that with going 8-5 a year ago. Lincoln Riley told me in our exclusive one-on-one interview that there's not one part of our program that I don't feel like is headed in a great direction. Now, does that mean we're satisfied with every single thing that's happening right now in recruiting or on the field? Of course not. That's why we're building. This new facility is going to be massive for us. We're not where we want to be right now, but we're not far off, and we're not slowing down. So he knows that they're not quite where they want to be right now. He acknowledges that, which I think is, if you're a USC fan, that's what you want to hear. And like we've talked all along, Ryan, Lincoln Riley, I think he's a guy you gotta just go down with the ship. If it doesn't go well, you got to hitch your wagon to the sky. Hope he figures it out, because I don't know if you can do much better. And they do have some momentum from the Holiday Bowl. I have some roster questions for sure. We'll see how long it takes for them to truly compete with Ohio State and Oregon, but I don't want a coaching change or anything like that. This is a guy you're just going to have to be patient with. Hope he makes adjustments like he did with the defensive staff. It's nice to hear him say that they're not quite up to speed with where they want to be, but going in the right direction. And if you're a USC fan, you can be annoyed, but I think it would be a worse thing if he weren't the coach. And I really believe that.
Yeah, we had a comment from Roger. I appreciate Riley being honest about USC NIL being behind. I don't know if he necessarily said that. They've come a long way, though, right? They're not quite where they want to be, but
yeah. When he talked about playing catch up, he meant how when Riley got there was nothing, no NIL, no House of Victory, no Conquest Collective, no Tommy Group. There was just no infrastructure, and his whole thing is they're really competing now, but there's still moves that need to be made. And I think when he talks about playing catch up, it's more, we didn't have it here, now we do, whereas some of these other schools, they got up and running a little bit sooner. But as we've talked about, and Chuck mentioned it earlier on the Helium Boys podcast, USC, their strategy, they thought, these schools that were opting for more paid for play, they're going to get in trouble, and then we're going to be on the right side of this. That was a mistake, and USC probably could have been doing more with definitely could have been doing more with NIL earlier, like some of these schools. So it's a little bit of a disconnect there. I really think he just means it wasn't there when he started, and now it is. But let's be honest, USC still is behind Oregon and Ohio State, and just about every team in the country outside of maybe Texas and some other teams are right there too. It's not a terrible spot to be.
Yeah. No, I mean, everyone's pretty much behind those schools, just putting all in there. We had a comment. So if you're watching live on YouTube, I will try to put your questions and comments up on the screen as we go. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see what those were. But Anthony said, Riley was quoted a couple times, whether it's Miller or Jaden, which is interesting, but I guess you want the competition to go into fall camp and have a starter named going into game week, especially the fact that Miller Moss was one of the players that was there in Indy.
So I see these quotes all the time and these questions. And I mean, we had Jaden on the show, Ryan, and he said he admitted he felt like he had a terrible spring. So I don't think he is really pushing Miller all that hard in the grand scheme of things. And Lincoln Riley, he wants to make sure Miller really earns it, and he's the guy. I haven't changed, or my stance hasn't changed at all. I'd be shocked if it's not Miller at this point. And I even asked Lincoln yesterday, would you ever opt for a 2-quarterback system? Maybe if Miller's a starter, you want to throw Jaden in there to give teams a different look. And he said he wouldn't. So it's going to be one guy. It's going to be Miller. And when Lincoln talks about the competition, it's not just it's not just Miller and Jaden. He also throws Jake Jensen in there too. So in Lincoln's eyes, I don't know how truthful it is. It's a 3-man competition, but I would still be shocked if it's not Miller Moss. And I expect Moss to be named the starter later on in fall camp.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. He mentioned something about that their roster isn't maybe done yet. There could still be some additions. And I know he talked a little bit about injuries, or at least talked about the couple of guys that were injured, but everyone else was pretty much healthy. So if you want to kind of give an update on those topics.
I don't know who they're going to add, but he gave that answer after being asked about offensive tackle, because remember in the spring, I think you were in that scrum too, Ryan. He talked about how USC, they don't really have a lot of depth at those tackle spots. It's Elijah Page at left tackle and Mason Murphy at right tackle. And then I think the rest of those reserves have a total of 9 snaps, and Tobias Raymond has all those snaps. It would be really, really unfortunate if someone did go down at the tackle spot, because then maybe you have to move Jonah away from center or whatever you got to do. It's just not going to be a good situation because they don't have a lot of competitive depth. So that I think when he talks about maybe not being done adding, it's about the offensive tackle spot, but we'll have to see. I believe USC still has 2 or 3 scholarships open, so they have some room to work with. We'll see. I don't know who they could possibly add on July 25th that could help, but I guess we'll leave that up to the staff. And then, the 2 injuries, I had Lincoln for the one-on-one interview, and I said, real quick, can we run through some of the injured guys? And he said, I'll save you the time. The only 2 guys who are going to be not ready for fall camp are Kololo Taga, the true freshman offensive tackle who has a foot injury, and then Carson Tabarachi, the tight end, who I guess really screwed up his neck at the end of spring camp, and we don't know a whole lot about that injury. Saw him in a brace at one point when he came out to practice. So everyone else is full go. Lake McCree, who tore his ACL before the Holiday Bowl, it sounds like he's ready to go. Gino Quinones, who tore up his knee against Nevada, he's ready to go. So credit to Lake. That was a much quicker recovery time than Gino had, because Gino's happened so early in the season. But both those guys, it sounds like, are ready. Zion Branch, Christian Pierce. I forget who else was on the shelf. Jalen Smith, I think. So USC will be fully healthy for the most part, and Barry Alexander too. That'll be good. That'll be huge.
Yeah, especially when talk about offensive line depth. Gino Quinones can be someone that could really help out there. So the fact that he was able to go, that's pretty cool. It's funny, like I saw him, I guess it was about a year ago. The offensive lineman did a NIL event at Topgolf, and then we just had one recently for the Branch brothers. To talk about that, my trophy's over there. I'll go grab that in a second. So it was funny. And Gino, even then, he like swung a golf club. Even he was, I don't think he had a brace on. Maybe he had like a light brace on or something, but it wasn't anything too terrible. So the fact that he's fully healthy now, about I guess about a year later or whatever, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a different time. I don't know. It was after the injury that that they did that Topgolf event, but he was still out there and looked okay. So getting him fully healthy, I think they need some depth all across the offensive line. You guys talked about on the Helium Boys podcast, and you just mentioned now, not a lot of experience there. So having someone like that, I mean, that's big that he's going to be able to go right from the beginning of fall camp. That
is big. Chris mentioned it on the other show. They just that's helpful for the guards, but they need help at tackle. If one of those guys goes down, then that probably screws up the whole line, because I think you have to put Jonah away from center because they have just more depth at center, whether that's Gino or Killian O'Connor going in for a play or multiple plays or multiple games, depending on the seriousness of an injury. I think that's a lot better than having Jonah stay at tackle and then having to put out a Tobias Raymond or moving someone else there, because they just don't have a lot of depth. So, Gino, it's encouraging. It sounds like the right guard spot's going to come down to him, Alani Noah or Amos Talele. So we got 3 guys who it seems like the staff is pretty high on for one spot. My question, though, is if Elijah Page goes down, okay, you throw Jonah out there. What the heck happens if Tobias Raymond if Mason Murphy goes down, is it Tobias Raymond? Is it Jonah at right tackle? Those are questions that are uncomfortable because you don't want to move your center to right tackle. That doesn't
No, you
make a
don't
whole
want
lot
to
of
move
sense.
Jonah. Yeah, you move them there. You don't want to move them again,
Yeah, exactly right.
All right. Well, let's we can probably move on to some of the players if that's cool with you. I guess we start with the quarterback. We assume going to be QB1. Miller Moss seemed like from one of the interviews that I saw that you guys did and on TV and everything, seemed to handle himself extremely well. I got to see him and talk to him a little bit at the Branch Brothers did their foundation, the Branch Out Foundation. They had an event at Topgolf, and Miller Moss was there along with Jacoby Lane and Deuce Robinson, and got to talk to some of those guys. Miller Moss can swing the club pretty good too, by the way, but he's very smooth. And it seemed like, that polished persona and leadership and all that came across in his interviews. What did you think of what Miller had to say at media days?
He was the one guy I didn't spend a ton of time with. That was more Shotgun and Chris. I was with Jonah a ton. I was with Kamari a ton. I watched a lot of Lincoln. Shotgun shared this one funny anecdote, though. A lot of people here, Ryan, are like these Midwest college football older reporters, and they really care about how USC and UCLA, these teams from the West, are coming into this hard-nosed, gritty conference. And a lot of USC players got those questions like, are you ready for this style of play? And the West Coast, there's this perception that it's softer football than what we're doing in this conference. And what do you have to say about that? And Miller was asked about that. I remember Shotgun was telling me, and he said, yeah, I've heard that before. And then he sort of stopped. And then the guy was like, well, what do you think of that? What is that perception wrong? And then Miller kind of smartly was like, took a deep breath. I need to remember my media training. I don't want to say anything that I might regret here. It's been fun to watch a lot of these guys answer those questions because for whatever reason here in Indianapolis, a lot of people care about that style of play question. And is USC going to be ready for teams running the ball down your throat? And do they have enough in the trenches? And I get those questions. It's just funny that USC has had to answer so much of that. And I don't know. I feel like once someone gets asked that once or twice, that's enough. But it's been hit over the head with the West Coast is soft and you guys aren't ready. And what are your thoughts about that? I think after yesterday, the USC players are ready to put on the pads and hit some people.
No, I would agree with that. And that's, to me, this season is a lot of it's in USC's control. Like, you could be doing really good things and, like, say you're Tennessee or something, and you've made a lot of good strides and recruiting, whatever you're doing, building the roster. And if you still have, like, Alabama and Georgia on your schedule, it's, those are, like, it takes a lot to win those games. I think USC's got winnable games up and down the schedule, and if you were to say Ohio State is this juggernaut that's going to be really tough to beat this year, or Oregon is this juggernaut that's going to be really tough to beat this year, I would agree with you. Like, they could be, we'll see how it plays out, but those could be like the Alabama, Georgias that would be on your schedule. And USC doesn't play either one of those. So but you have to take care of your business. If you get pushed around on the road at Minnesota or by Penn State at home, then you're going to get these guys are soft kind of moniker and stuff. So I think there's a lot that's in USC's control. And you could get pushed around by Ohio State or Oregon and you're like, oh, you're soft. If you get pushed around by one of those other teams that aren't quite on that elite tier, at least roster-wise from what we've seen this offseason, then it's going to, I think, look worse. So I think USC can be in control of that by not getting pushed around and showing some toughness. And that's the whole point of having this new defense and all of that. And by the way, still scoring a lot of points because that's what you do well. So I think the good thing for USC is there's a lot of it that's in its own control. And if you get pushed around, it's because you got pushed around and not because you end up playing some super juggernaut. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Penn State or Wisconsin or something are way better than we thought this year. Luke Fickell's a great coach. You got, Nebraska on the rise. A lot of these teams are kind of on the rise where like USC is. Who's going to be ahead? You can lose a bunch of those games or win a bunch of them. And but I like it that I think a lot of it's in USC's own control.
And hey, there's a reason why Lincoln Riley and Benny Wiley, I guess they rhyme, put together this huge strength program because this is what they're worried about. They're playing these teams that maybe don't have great quarterbacks, but they're known more for offensive lines. They're known more for running backs. And teams in the Big Ten are going to try to run it down your throat. We got to beef up. That was the big plan all along from January to now, and guys have made huge strides. Nate Clifton gained 15 pounds, going to move over from a depth piece maybe on the edge to an impact guy in the middle, kind of a rotational piece. So I think that, yeah, what you said is true. You got to take care of business, but they're at least trying to do things that will put them in the best position to succeed. And I think gaining all this weight and getting bigger, yeah, it's because they didn't have a great season last year, but it's also because a lot of teams on their schedule this year, you're not facing a lot of great passing attacks, but you are going to face a lot of talented rushing attacks. And it's all calculated, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's all about toughness. You have to, when the lights come on, when the bright lights come on, you have to shine. Speaking of, let me show you.
Yeah. So can you fill me in? So it's Top Golf. Were you doing one of the games? Was it longest drive? How'd it work?
Oh, it was one of the games. I think it was like the Top Golf game. So we each got 10 swings, and you just had to hit targets. So you didn't have to be the back fence. I kept hitting a 7-iron straight, and I hit a target 10 out of 10 times. So I just got a lot of points. Yeah. So I almost had like 700 points. The closest person was like 550. So I blew everybody away, but it was, yeah, it was great. Funny, I golfed the next day and I was terrible. I was just awful. I just won the Top Golf events and I played an actual course and I was bad. So that's just golf. But for those 10 swings, I was good. I was like, all right, I dialed it in. So the Branch brothers were funny when I came up to get the trophy, and they were just like, dude, that's great. It was funny. But it was a good time. But yeah, you got to shine when the spotlight's on you.
You're probably on a high, and then you golf the next day. And yeah, isn't that what happens? You kill it at the driving range, and then you go out to the real course, and it's like, oh man, this is not what happened yesterday.
Essentially, that's what it was and stuff. But yeah, shout out to the Branch brothers, the fact that they have a foundation there. I posted on the Peristyle some pictures and some details about what was going on there. I was going to download a picture for this show, but I forgot about it. But you get to see the trophy. It'll be sitting on the desk now, so we can see it while we're. But that was a lot of fun. But it was cool to see Miller there, and he can definitely swing a club. It's funny, Deuce Robinson and I were very close after the first round of 5 swings, and then Deuce came over. It's that was Miller. Miller was shooting for him, so they had his name. The name was up on the screen. There was a screen for the leaderboard, and I was like, "Oh, Deuce, you're good." And it was really Miller just playing for his turn or something. So it was kind of funny. So Miller can play too. Okay. Also we can stick on the offensive line. Jonah Monheim was there, and like you mentioned, USC's new center for this year. What did Jonah have to say at Media Day?
I asked him a lot about the guys around him, and he said Emmanuel Pregnon is the biggest guy on the line, and he feels really confident with him. And that's someone I feel really confident in too on this line at left guard. Remember, he didn't start that first game against San Jose State, but then last season started every other game. Had some ups and downs, but I think another year in the strength program, another year under Josh Henson, that's someone you can certainly rely on. Sounds like Mason Murphy at right tackle is working really hard. Jonah talked a lot about that. And Mason, in my opinion, has been a really good Trojan. He's a guy who, when the playing time wasn't necessarily going his way, he didn't even think about transferring, always was very bought in. And it seemed like in each of his years he's played a lot, maybe he didn't start the season as a starter, and then at the end of the year he's almost always ended it there. So I'm excited for him to get his chance to start that first game, and it sounded like Jonah was too. And then Elijah Page, talked a lot about him, how yes, he's young, but he follows directions really well. They feel like he's ready for this role, and I think it's a fascinating part of the team, Ryan. A redshirt freshman, not a true freshman, but he didn't play enough games to warrant a non-redshirt last season. So you're rolling a starting left tackle at USC, a redshirt freshman. He's got to be doing something right to get that position, and I'm excited to see what Elijah Page can do. Jonah talked a lot about him. He got a lot of questions, like Miller did, about being in the trenches at USC. I asked him also about why he chose to return, and he talked about he wanted to play on the inside and give scouts more film on him on the inside instead of at one of the tackle spots. I thought this was interesting too. I didn't know he is someone who he says he always needs to be gaining weight. He's not a guy who needs to be losing weight. He's always trying to get to that weight goal. He wants to play at 310 pounds this season, and that he needed to gain like 15 pounds in order to do that. I just kind of felt like he was a massive human who didn't really need to, or I might be cutting out, sorry, who didn't need to work quite as hard to maintain his weight, but he did. And that was something new that I learned too.
All right. And then one last one, Kamari Ramsey, new addition, obviously comes over from UCLA, part of, the Danton Lynn system. We talked about him and John Humphreys coming over, and I had him pretty high on my most important list just because there's, limited experience in this new defense and players want to learn from other players along with the coaches. But he seemed like he, handled himself very well, representing USC now instead of UCLA. What were your thoughts on what Kamari Ramsey had to say?
He was a guy who I thought was going to play a ton when he transferred. We did that most important Trojans transfer portal episode where we ranked all the guys, and I had him number one. So I was happy to see him represented here. He talked a lot about how in spring practice, yes, he followed Danton Lynn. Yes, he played a lot last season at UCLA, but he still felt like he needed to prove himself, and he did. I remember after one practice, Lincoln Riley said, I asked him who was the most impressive of the newcomers, and he mentioned Kamari Ramsey. So he really made an impression. Of course, being here at Media Day too, that means he has done a lot right to not only play well, but be a leader. So I thought that was something unique to him. Mason Cobb last season was the transfer who came to Media Day, and now it's Kamari Ramsey. I feel better about Kamari Ramsey's fit than I did Mason Cobb a year ago. So I think USC's going in the right direction with that. I asked him who's going to be a breakout candidate, who's really impressed him so far. He mentioned Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. We've heard a ton of buzz about those two guys, so that wasn't really a surprise. And then just hearing him talk about Danton Lynn's defense, it's just night and day from what we heard about Alex Grinch. No overthinking. They have like 8 base plays, and they run a whole bunch of different things out of those 8 base plays, but you really don't have to do a whole lot from a learning the playbook perspective. It's simplified. Danton Lynn does a really good job of eliminating your weaknesses, or at least trying to do so. He knows where the weakness is on a defense, and he'll do some things to make sure that doesn't get exploited by the offense, putting guys in the best position to succeed. A lot of Media Day talk, but based on what we did see last year from UCLA, I know they had a much better defensive front than USC did, but UCLA, that defense, those guys were put in positions to succeed, and they did have really, really great games. That Utah game, which I know they lost, comes to mind, but those were 2 defenses that were just battling. And so Kamari, he did say we need to prove it, though. It's a different situation. It's a different system here at USC, and he's excited to do that. So he didn't really guarantee anything in terms of what's going to happen this upcoming season, but he talked a lot about how Danton Lynn is going to make sure the guys are put in the positions to succeed. And after last season, that was music to my ears, that's for sure.
What are the, common themes I think Shotgun was talking about on the Helium Boys podcast is that they were talking about cohesion. And when I was listening to that, all I could think about is talking to Lincoln Riley after year 1 and why are you keeping Alex Grinch? And it was for, that cohesion. You wanted some continuity from the staff from before. And there were so many changes and all that. So it wasn't necessarily a good thing that happened, but it seemed like in this case it is. Did you kind of see that as a common theme as well?
Oh, yeah. Everyone seems to be on the same page. And I think this team, like, they're just friendlier, if that makes sense. I don't want to say like there were cliques on the team last year, but I know the receivers, they didn't always all get along 100%. And I feel like everyone's together, and that's a credit to Lincoln Riley for bringing in a defensive staff that it's all new, but it seems like they're, at least in terms of X's and O's in practice, they're all pushing in the same direction. So I do think that's encouraging. And last year, I mean, just remember, Ryan, like one game it's Mason Cobb at linebacker, and then one game it's Rajon Davis at linebacker, and then one game Chris Thompson is getting some, like, there was just no plan. I felt like with the linebackers last season, it was like, okay, this didn't work, let's try something else. This didn't work, try something else. And I just feel like this new staff, it's going to be a lot more calculated, and then the players seem more together. Don't know exactly how much that can lead to wins and losses. It certainly won't hurt. They do have some issues roster wise, I think, in the middle of the defensive line, and they don't have a lot of experience on the edge as well. But how can you not like people being on the same page, guys liking each other? It seems like the chemistry's there, and the staff there, it's a cohesive group, which is good.
Yeah, I think year 1, a lot of transfers, a lot of new everything, but there was good chemistry. Last year, not as good. and you saw the record suffer from it. So if it's good this year, and they like the scheme, that's probably better. So why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back. We're going to talk about some of if there's any other topics from Media Day, and then some of the kind of newsy stuff from around college football in general that affect USC today and down the road. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute. All right, we're back here on the Peristyle Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Abraham, publisher of USCFootball.com, and we have Connor Morrissette, Mr. Triple Double in Indianapolis for a few more hours, finishing up everything with Big Ten Media Day. Was there anything else from Media Day you wanted to share before we kind of jump into some other topics?
Well, I don't know if you saw, remember Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa coach, kind of crapped on Lincoln Riley like a year ago. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So he was asked about that, and then he kind of walked it back and said, I have the utmost respect for them. They're going to compete for a championship in our league. I can guarantee you that. One of the USC writers, I think, was looking for an inflammatory quote, and instead he got some nice words from Kirk Ferentz. But yeah, he was really upset that day at Lincoln Riley for whatever reason. He brought up the Tulane bowl game kind of out of the blue, and I think that angered a lot of USC fans. I was looking forward to USC playing Iowa. Of course, that didn't end up happening this year. Hopefully in the future they can get together, because that defense against Lincoln Riley's offense would be really fun to watch. But yeah, Kirk Ferentz kind of poured water on the flames, if you will. That was funny.
Yeah, obviously he was embattled because his son was the offensive coordinator. And they weren't scoring points. And so he was trying to say, see, scoring points isn't all cracked up to be.
Exactly.
Which, would you rather lose a game? What did they lose the Big Ten championship? They didn't score. It was like 29-0 to Michigan or something.
Yeah.
Or would you rather lose, 48-45 or whatever, the Tulane game was? Like, it's a lot more fun. At least you're scoring a bunch of points,
No, I agree. I like, you got to just focus on yourself. Don't hire your son.
Yeah. So you just kind of like, catch some stray bullets coming Lincoln Riley's way. We'll talk about that, some five bomb stuff. We have a couple of voicemails. We'll kind of get to that too. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, Stuart Mandel tweeted this yesterday. Obviously, USC, Big Ten, long standing tradition, going to and winning Rose Bowls. The Rose Bowl is one of those institutions that's really hanging on to the past. I don't think they've made an official statement about NIL. I don't think they like that, or the transfer portal or whatever. But they don't want their game to move. It's tied. The Rose Parade predates the Rose Bowl. They want it on January 1st. A lot of people would love to see a championship or a permanent semifinal for the granddaddy of them all. But apparently, according to Stuart Mandel and other reports that were out there, they've asked not to be included in the semifinal rotation, preferring to host a January 1st quarterfinal game every year. So a little Rose Bowl news I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Good. Let them host the quarterfinal every year, and let's not change anything. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, as they say. If you can keep it on that same day every year and just play a quarterfinal instead of a semifinal, I think that's great, don't you?
No, yeah. It's I'd love it to be a permanent part of the playoff, one of the whatever, but it's also fun to go. Like, if you live here in Southern California, go to the parade, go to the game. I like doing that too. So they're just never, they're not changing, and it might be that the Rose Bowl is just passed up and it's just not going to be what it was, but they want their game their way. I don't think they care if it's the biggest part of college football or just what they want it to be every year. So we'll have to talk to somebody from the Rose Bowl about that. But I thought that was kind of interesting. And then also, Ross Dellinger does a really good job. Was at SI over at Yahoo Sports Now. Talk to sources about stuff like this too. How is the House settlement with the NCAA going to work? What are the details about, roster limits and Title IX and budgets and all that kind of stuff? And Ross had some reporting that looks like what's being floated out there and agreed to, and we could know as soon as tomorrow, that this is going to be finalized, but he is reporting that they have decided what the roster limits would be, and it's a big impact for football and actually for baseball as well if you're a USC baseball fan. But he was saying that the new roster limits would be 105, up from 85, so 20 more for football. Men's and women's basketball would each have 15. Baseball, 34. I mean, a huge difference. 11.7 to 34 roster spots. At least those are scholarships. Softball, USC doesn't have 25. And then volleyball, 18. And this would be the starting of 2025, 2026. So what they're getting rid of is, I think it's kind of like a cap. They want to cap scholarships, but you can't really do that. So they're going to cap the roster spots. And then schools would have the opportunity to say, well, we have 105 roster spots. And right now, I think you can have up to 120 players on your football team, but not all of them can be on scholarship, only 85. So now they're going to say you have 105 spots, and all of them can be on scholarship if you want. And if you want, you can give out partial scholarships. So normally football and basketball, they've been head count sports, meaning if you're on scholarship, it's a full ride. Where baseball and other sports, you have partial scholarships. Like, I know USC's beach volleyball team, even though they have like 15 spots on the roster, I think they only have 6 scholarships. So you have to divide those up. Track, they have to do that a lot. A lot of walk-ons, a lot of partial scholarships. Baseball, for sure, USC's had a really hard time keeping up with their tradition because it's a very expensive school, and it's hard to do a partial scholarship there. So baseball could be the biggest winner for USC and other sports, where you could have 34 scholarship baseball players. And you're worried about losing guys to the draft and all that. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So everything will now be, instead of a head count sport, what is it? It's called I forget what equivalency sport. So you're allowed to have partial scholarships for all that. I don't see football having partial scholarships. That would just be a competitive disadvantage. But he's reporting that it's probably going to be an extra $3 to $7 million per year per school in scholarship costs, and that could be on top of the $21.5 million or whatever that is to start there. But I thought that was really interesting. For USC, I think a lot of fans would like to see track be a part of that, but that wasn't really mentioned here. But baseball could get a lot better, and then for football, you just have a lot more guys on scholarship. And I guess you don't have to, but that's the plan. I think for a big sports program, if you're Alabama or Ohio State, USC, you want all your football players on scholarship. So you could have 20 more guys on scholarship than you do now. But long kind of ramble there. But any thoughts on all that, Connor?
If I had good special teams players who weren't on scholarship, I'd try to take care of them first, because I feel like with 85 right now, you already have some unhappy people who maybe think they should be playing and don't play, and you add 20 more position players. Like, to me, I don't know how you make everyone happy when it's already so hard to make everyone happy. 85, it's certainly good. It's better to have more options. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I feel like USC probably won't go all the way to 105. Maybe depending on a class, they'd have like 95 scholarships, and then from there you could have 15, or if it's 95, 10 walk-ons. Bad math there. You don't need to give a scholarship to every guy, because I just think that would lead to some problems in the locker room and unhappy playing time. Like, we already have these issues with 85, so that's kind of where my mind goes when you say that. I do think it's good. I'm happy for baseball. I know Shotgun's really happy too. He was explaining to me how this is really going to help mid-major baseball teams last night. It seems like a step in the right direction. I do think it's a delicate balance though with football.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. I wrote some stuff in the War Room a couple weeks ago about some of this, and how will the money be allocated? How does this affect Title IX? If you add a whole bunch of scholarships in football, are you going to add scholarships in other sports and for women and to offset things? Are you going to get rid of some of the non-revenue men's sports that just kind of take some of those scholarships away? We'll know a lot more on Friday, reportedly. But yeah, this is interesting. But the biggest winner here could be the baseball team. USC's roster is already big for football. You just would have more scholarships available. But I'm curious to see, do you fill it out? I mean, will Ohio State have 105 players on scholarship? Will Oregon have 105 players on scholarship? And will some schools not because you just don't need it? It does seem like a lot. And I think the 120 thing kind of came up too. But no, and Roger's saying in the chat it's 105 with a 120 player cap. I do not believe that's the case. If the player cap is the cap, it's right now you can have 120 players on your roster. They're getting rid of the roster caps. I mean, they're getting rid of the scholarship caps and giving you a roster cap. So you can't say you can have 105 on scholarship. That defeats the whole purpose. That's what they have now. They have a scholarship cap and then a roster cap. This is just a roster. Have as many dudes on scholarship as you want. Give them half scholarship if you want. No scholarship, whatever you want. But that's all you can have on the roster. So that's sort of the solution that's coming out of this House settlement. So
yeah, you can't have 106.
Yeah. There's no 120 roster cap or anything like that. So 105 is the cap. And like Connor said, you could have some dudes that aren't on scholarship. Okay. Sweet. Any other thoughts on that? We can move on.
I'm good to move on.
We have. I'm going to play these two voicemails for you. It's the same guy back to back, but similar topics here.
Hi, Ryan. Love your show. Love 2-Star. This is probably off topic, but I can't take it anymore. Feinbaum was on ESPN again this morning saying Lincoln Riley ran. Unbelievable. You know, it could also be said that his hero, his idol, Nick Saban, also ran. He ran from Alabama. Under NIL, Alabama can no longer buy all the best players and best portal players. You saw the handwriting on the wall. So could it be said that he ran? Just saying.
To be fair, Alabama has like the best class in the country right now too, so they're signing the best players still. But anyway, and here's part 2 of his voicemail.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Connor. This is more regarding Feinbaum. Could it actually be maybe that Lincoln Riley ran, so-called ran, because USC offered him a boatload of money? And also, would you rather live in Pacific Palisades, Palos Verdes, wherever, overlooking the ocean, or in Norman, Oklahoma, dodging tornadoes, hail, thunderstorms, heat, and whatever? Sounds like a pretty good reason for me to run, and I'd do it. Thank you.
What do you think, Connor?
I didn't listen to the Feinbaum stuff. I don't really have any time for that because, you know, like, yeah, can you criticize Lincoln Riley for last season? Yeah, but it seems like he's kind of being a little inflammatory with what he's saying and how they should fire him and how Deion Sanders would be a better fit than Lincoln Riley. I thought Antonio Morales of The Athletic, our friend, brought up a great point. Like, Deion Sanders doesn't travel to recruit. How the heck is that going to work at USC? Sure, they'll get some guys because it's Deion Sanders, but if you think NIL is a mess at USC right now, and they hire Deion Sanders, just wait for that to all happen. Like, I guess I get what he's saying. Like, yeah, maybe some people thought this was going to be this big home run so fast and they'd be in the college football playoff every year. That hasn't happened, but he doesn't deserve to be fired. He you know, it's not a fail. I haven't even listened, so I don't know what I'm responding to, but it seemed to anger a lot of people. Those shows are not worth it. You know, like the First Takes, all that crap. I kind of like Paul Feinbaum, but I feel like he misses the mark on this one.
Yeah, I kind of do too. I mean, I've been on his show before back in the day. He's an entertainer, and you can get a take. And he was like, "Hey, I think it's a fair take because Lincoln Riley I mean, you shouldn't have been 7-5. The roster was too good to be 7-5. You know, and you had you had the best player in the country. It just that was a fail, and I think people can fairly call him out on that. To say that he's not going to do it going forward, Feinbaum might be right. I didn't listen to it either, so I don't know exactly what he said. But this is, a year where you have to show improvement. You're going into a bigger conference and better opponents and all that. So yeah, it's. I don't think it's anything that Lincoln Riley needs to pay attention to, and the fact that fans care that much. I mean, I don't like. Who cares? Like, people talk about all the time. Like, Cowherd said this. My dad will call me. Like, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm friends with the guy, but like, not everything he says is true. He's going to give you his opinion. He's given a lot of opinions. He's on TV for 4 hours a day. You got to say a lot of stuff, you know. And if you get something that you can get a lot of mileage out of, he's creating content. And if he has a take that's like, hey, Riley sucks, that's something you could ride for a couple hours or whatever and get a lot of content out of. So Lincoln Riley can shut him up by winning a bunch of games. You know, and he'll be like, you know what, I didn't think Riley was going to be good, but he turned things around. That's all you can do, you know. Just like you said, people are talking about, is USC soft? Or they're going to, you know, well, don't get pushed around. If you get pushed around, then that's everyone, you know, people have that thought of, oh, USC is going to be soft. They're a West Coast team, blah, blah, blah. Well, don't get pushed around. And if you do, then you're going to prove people right. Otherwise, you can show them like, look, this isn't, you know, we got a lot of good players too. We can play different styles. You're not going to be able to keep up with us on the scoreboard. And also, we can stop your run. And if they can do that stuff, then you shut people up.
Just comes down to winning games. Exactly like you said. That's the biggest thing. You go 7-5 when you have a Heisman Trophy winner returning, and people thought you were a good chance team to make the college football playoff, then you're going to get some criticism. And I think that's just part of it. And Paul Feinbaum, like you said, Ryan, he's an entertainer, and he's kind of outlandish, and he's going a little bit crazy with it. But at the end of the day, USC underachieved last year. You got to answer for that, and this is just part of it.
Yeah, Grateful Trojan says, without Harbaugh, Lincoln Riley is Feinbaum's new target. I don't know. I didn't realize Harbaugh was a target, but yeah. So there was a lot of reasons you could like get on Harbaugh, and then he goes out and wins a national championship, and they leaves for the NFL.
Yeah.
So that's how you should like. He's probably not going to talk crap about Harbaugh anymore because he won a national championship and beat an SEC team and all of that. We got a couple questions, and we'll let you go. I know you're going to get out of there, Connor. Reggie from New Mexico wrote in email. Thanks for the weekly information that you guys bring to the table, even though it's been more painful than optimal. My question is, with the current state of the program right now, with recruiting, NIL, etc., you guys say that we have smart people now running the show. However, there seems to be some residual, unjustified fear and apathy coming from some in charge. I know that it takes time, patience, and faith from the fan base, but realistically, I would like to believe that the fan base can/will stick. But with other teams in the LA market getting more coverage and also being in one of the entertainment capitals of the world, do you ever see a day that USC can be a successful program going forward where it's compared to the Alabamas, Georgias, Oregons, Ohio States, etc.? Thanks, team, for the coverage and allowing me to vent a little bit. Reggie from New Mexico.
Anything can happen. I felt like the email there was going in one direction, and then it kind of changed. But overall, I mean, we talk about the smart people being in charge. I think when you look at NIL and you look at recruiting, who's in charge of that? At the end of the day, it's Lincoln Riley. He sort of dictates what happens, and the results speak for themselves. And Lincoln told me yesterday, we have a lot of momentum. We're not where we want to be, but we're going in the right direction. I said it a couple of weeks ago on the show, Ryan, and I still feel that way now. He's in charge, and he's not responsible for everything, but when the results aren't going a certain way, whether it's winning games or whether it's on the recruiting trail, it starts and it ends with him, in my opinion, and he needs to be the one to set the table. Here's our plan, here's our strategy, and get everyone aligned. And I don't really know if he's done that, especially on the recruiting side of things. And I in my opinion, I don't know if USC will get to the Alabama, Georgia level, or maybe even a consistent 12-team playoff team if they don't get aligned. And I think it starts with him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And yeah, I think they can get back to that, that level. It's interesting. There's a new tier with, you could be a perennial college football playoff attendee, and if you're in the top 12 or 11 or whatever every year, because it's a group of 5, you can be there. And there's a bunch of teams like a Penn State that's like 10-2 every year. They could potentially be a playoff team all the time. USC, I think, could be in that category. And then can you get to that level where you're winning or making the finals and stuff a lot? But I think the first goal is you got to be, hey, we're in the playoff picture. USC's never made a playoff before. Now it's 12. You should be able to do that. So we'll see. And one last one from Swayze. Enjoying your interviews and seeing that the players we have are intelligent and good young men. I'd rather have a team of players who want to be here rather than those we, quote, bought. But I still worry that college football is turning into a professional minor league. The whole point of college football was that it was amateur athletes representing the university cheers. And then he says, P.S. I made up this image with the help of AI. And he sent an image of RIP college football. It's like a headstone, 1869 to 2024. A cancerous adverse TV and commercials propagated exponentially, eventually consuming the entirety of the game, leaving only a few kickoffs in the end zone. So there's definitely people out there, Connor, that think this isn't the college football that they fell in love with, which it's not. I don't know if they're going to go away. Ratings are still going through the roof, but there are some people that just don't like this new version of college football.
Well, the amateur model has been done now for a little bit, so that's out the window. So I get the headstone there. That makes a lot of sense. What was the first part of the email?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry.
That's okay. I just deleted it. Let's see.
Sorry.
Oh, he enjoyed the interviews and stuff.
Yes.
Players that want to be there, and as opposed to being bought.
Yes, and I do think there's some definite positives that come with that for sure. Lincoln Riley's talked about how they want to develop out of, from the high school ranks instead of having to rely on the transfer portal. And he said yesterday, the reason they didn't really add a ton on the offensive and defensive line is because they thought that strategy was the best, which, I mean, that's just not true. They went after a bunch of players on both lines and they just didn't get them. So that was a falsehood that he said, but eventually they do want to go in that direction. And I get it. Having players who want to be there. I don't know if everyone really wanted to be at USC last season, especially with the way the defense was and the coaching that team was getting. Like who would want to be a part of that? I get it. This year, it seems like the buy-in's better. The defensive coaching should be better. And if those things are both true, of course, players will want to be here. And it could be a fun season in that regard. I just want them to finish strong because every year under Riley, they've ended so poorly.
Yeah.
Outside of the Holiday Bowl, just end the regular season strong. If they lose to Michigan early, if they slip up early, fine. I don't think in my head right now it's a 12-team playoff team, but if you end the year strong, get people excited. Like remember Washington a couple of years ago when they were out of the national title or college football playoff hunt, but they either had one or two losses and they just kept going right on up. If you can end on a positive trajectory, I think that can go a long way to really getting fans back and helping people, even if you do have 3 or 4 losses, just because the ends of these last 2 seasons have been very painful.
Yeah. I mean, they beat Oregon and like if USC, maybe they lose you lose to Michigan, maybe Penn State or something, you lose a few games where you're like, I get even 3 losses, you can be in the playoff picture.
Yeah.
But say it's like you're a 7-4 team and you get to play Notre Dame and you beat Notre Dame at the end. And it's like, okay, you're 8-4. You didn't go to the playoff, but you're, upper echelon of the Big Ten and, poised to kind of go higher and get a decent bowl game and all that. So I think you got to end strong, in the regular season too, and because you got some really good games you can be in there for. So, all right. But yeah, thanks. We didn't do a House of Victory player interview this week because, Connor's traveling. So we'll try to get back to those with fall camp coming up. We'll see what the schedule is, if guys are going to be available during camp and all that. But definitely thanks to I left the House of Victory logo up on our YouTube channel most of the show. I forgot about that. It wasn't a House of Victory show, but I give them some free pub, I guess. But yeah, so we appreciate them, and we'll keep working to bring some more players to you through through our podcast and everything, and probably get the Tunnel Vision nightly show. Not every night, but at night show going too once we got camp going, and of course games and all that. Crazy travel schedule for us coming up. I got to book some of that stuff today, but crazy travel schedule for you. You're flying back to LA tonight, Connor. So thanks for being there and thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. The Wi-Fi here has been bad, but it worked out for us today. I'm very happy about that. Glad there were no interruptions or anything like that. Good to see you, Ryan.
Yeah, good to see you too. All right, everyone else, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. And we will talk to you next time.